And Ben had to do this with Caleb to some degree. He'd been beaten up, lost some confidence. What did you do in the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks with Trevor? Because the ascension was noticeable very quickly. What in the hell did you do?
Colin, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it. A ton of respect for you in this program. Trevor was so cool to work with at an early point because of the humility you talked about, of being able to say, man, I do want to break this thing down. I'd like to change my footwork in the shotgun. He was always a right foot forward guy. I ended up wanting to go left foot forward. That was his idea. That was something that I was comfortable with after working with Matthew and Baker. And we started there, Colin. He wasn't able to throw for a long time during spring because of a shoulder surgery. So we were able to really start from the ground up, really start with the footwork, start to work with the playbook, the protections, the schemes from the neck up without worrying about the result of a completion. Right? Like, we're just worrying about your footwork and your thought process, going through the cycle of the snap without worrying about the throw. And then, okay, get into training camp. Now we're getting closer. And it did. It took some time. We were able to run the football effectively early in the season, which helped us win games. And Trevor managed the game at a high level. And then once, the pass game took off, he brought us to a whole nother level.
I completely concur with his emphasis on performing as a high-level game manager, a concept I consistently advocate for. The ability to manage contests, to truly steward a game from start to finish, is paramount. This is an area where Trevor Lawrence, in my view, has demonstrably matured. We can extol his touchdown passes, dissect his mechanical refinements, and celebrate his various athletic gifts, but a substantial component of his development has been his evolution into a markedly superior game manager. I've reiterated this point incessantly. To attain genuine elite status as a quarterback, you must first master elite game management. That is the bedrock. That is the indispensable foundation upon which all other spectacular attributes are built. It is not the improvisational scrambles, nor the aesthetically perfect back shoulder throws, though those are undoubtedly important, necessary, and thrilling to witness. You must possess the capacity to manage the flow, the tempo, and the situational dynamics of a game. Frankly, I am tremendously enthusiastic about the trajectory of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Occasionally, a franchise emerges that captures attention. I hesitate to label the Jaguars' ascent as entirely unforeseen, given the presence of a talent like Trevor Lawrence and the subsequent excellent hiring of head coach Liam Cohen. I discussed my expectations for that specific pairing extensively last offseason. However, the NFL landscape is often dotted with teams that experience a brief surge, only to recede into the background without sustaining that momentum. You reflect on it as, oh, that was a commendable season they had. The Jaguars themselves have experienced such a season in the not-too-distant past, a promising campaign from which no lasting contention materialized. Recall perhaps a decade ago, or the 2017 season, where hopes of a Super Bowl run were kindled but never realized, and the franchise subsequently found itself far from that echelon again. This current iteration, however, possesses a formidable platform for sustained growth. The runway for success is extensive, and a significant portion of that potential stems not solely from the individual holding the football, but from Liam Cohen. I am a staunch proponent of the philosophy that when you establish a coach of that caliber as the foundational pillar of your organization, you create the conditions for something truly special. That is the pathway to sustainability. It liberates you from an over-reliance on any single specific talent, be it a running back, a wide receiver, or a left tackle. It affords the franchise significantly greater operational freedom and flexibility. Now, combine that coaching foundation with a quarterback of Trevor Lawrence's caliber, a player with whom the coaching staff is ideally in complete synchronization, an on-field extension of their philosophy, and you find yourself in an exceptionally robust and consistent position to achieve greatness. This structure also fosters resilience against roster volatility. It mitigates the panic when a star player demands an exorbitant contract or requires a major surgical procedure. The system itself provides stability. Therefore, what we witnessed from the Jaguars this past season was, in my estimation, merely a preview of this team's capabilities. I perceive no compelling reason why the Jaguars should not solidify themselves as a primary fixture in the NFL's upper tier. If we examine the last 7 or 8 years, certain franchises, the Bills, Ravens, 49ers, Chiefs, Eagles became perennial presences. Year after year, they were teams you simply knew would be formidable. Facing them in the playoffs was a daunting prospect, not a favorable matchup. You didn't look at a playoff bracket and think, excellent, we get to play them. It was more a sense of, all right, we have to find a way to get past this formidable opponent. The Jaguars, in their recent playoff loss, experienced firsthand how challenging it is to overcome such an entrenched contender. I see no rationale why Jacksonville cannot assume that very role for the foreseeable future. Admittedly, the league is in a period of transition, and the composition of those historical, perennial teams may shift. I reference them merely as a benchmark for sustained relevance. But for the next 3, 4, or 5 years, I am confident the Jaguars can consistently occupy that top-tier space. They can become a team where opponents enter a matchup hoping for Trevor Lawrence to make an uncharacteristic error or for a key player to be less than fully healthy come January. The prevailing thought will be, if this Jaguars team is operating at peak capacity, you had better hope your defensive coordinator has an exceptional plan to contain Liam Cohen's scheme and Trevor Lawrence's execution, or that your own offense possesses the firepower to keep pace. Without those advantages, it becomes a profoundly difficult challenge. You then find yourself in scenarios where you are desperately hoping for ancillary factors: home field advantage, inclement weather, specific conditions that might theoretically impede the Jaguars' style. Maybe if it's bitterly cold, Trevor won't be as sharp. Or a windy day could neutralize some of their downfield passing game. These are the kinds of mental gymnastics and hoped-for edges you resort to when facing the league's most consistently elite operations. It's akin to thinking, this 49ers team is incredibly potent, but perhaps Brock Purdy isn't at his best in heavy rain. Or, we need the home field to leverage the cold for our ground game. That is the tier I believe the Jaguars are poised to enter. Now, I must confess, I typically do not engage deeply with many coach interviews during the offseason. The content often tends toward the generic. For instance, while I discuss the Chargers frequently, I haven't sought out numerous Jim Harbaugh interviews because the takeaways are often predictable. Justin Herbert is a phenomenal quarterback who works incredibly hard. And while that is undoubtedly true and valuable, it can become repetitive. My conviction in Liam Cohen, however, is of the highest order, to the absolute maximum degree. When you survey the landscape of teams that made coaching changes this cycle, the Giants, the Bills, the Ravens come immediately to mind. The unspoken reality, in my view, is that Liam Cohen was the premier candidate available. Some of those franchises may have moved on from their previous coach a year too late. Even a team like the Eagles, for whom winning a Super Bowl was a monumental achievement, faced a scenario where, had they fallen short, the narrative would have been, Liam Cohen was the hire to make. The Jaguars secured him. They were the franchise that identified and acquired the most sought-after coaching asset. This, I believe, heralds a new era for the Jaguars, a reality I sense the broader NFL discourse has yet to fully internalize. The conversation remains disproportionately centered on the Giants, Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs. To be fair, those teams have earned that attention through sustained achievement and the exploits of their quarterbacks. It is logical. However, the Jacksonville Jaguars must become a regular focal point in the national discussion. This is precisely why I am producing a dedicated Jaguars analysis during Super Bowl week. I take pride in and make a concerted effort to highlight teams and narratives that are not dominating the ubiquitous headlines. Admittedly, this can be a challenging endeavor, particularly during the off-season lull when viewer interest naturally wanes. The economic reality for content covering smaller market teams is stark. A small percentage of a large audience, like that for the Bills, dwarfs a similar percentage of a smaller, albeit passionate, fan base. My objective is to establish a more consistent, reliable rhythm for covering such teams in depth, irrespective of the calendar. This winter and spring will be an experiment in that regard, as generating interest for smaller market team analysis when the season is over is notoriously difficult. Even fans acknowledge they need a break from football content. I completely understand and respect that. Yet I am determined to explore more sustainable methods. It is telling that in this immediate post-season period, meaning after the 2025 season concludes, the teams generating the most discussion and momentum are the usual suspects. Again, this is justifiable. But I am here to emphatically plant a flag. The Jacksonville Jaguars deserve a substantial share of that forward-looking optimism and analytical focus. There exists a potential for them to make a handful of strategic offseason moves that could generate tremendous football momentum. Not just narrative buzz, but tangible on-field potential heading into the next campaign. I am fascinated to observe how aggressive their front office chooses to be. When I evaluate team trajectories, I often conceptualize 2 to 3 year competitive windows. This is not to say the window slams shut thereafter, but it establishes a focused timeline. The explicit goal is to win a Super Bowl within that span. After that period, you reassess. It may be the dawn of a new window. I applied this framework to the Eagles after their 2024 Super Bowl victory. The next 3-year window began. The Jaguars, in my analysis, are now at the opening of such a window. Considering how the playoffs unfolded and observing the Super Bowl participants, one might question if the Jaguars could have contended with the Patriots in the AFC Championship or matched up with the Seahawks. In hindsight, the Seahawks played a spectacular, defensively dominant game in their matchup, applying relentless pressure on Trevor Lawrence. A few critical, high-level sequences ultimately decided that contest in Seattle's favor. However, it is crucial to note, the Jaguars were far from performing at their optimum level in that game. They were not executing their best brand of football, and yet they remained competitive, lingering within striking distance. Now, contemplate a scenario where the Jaguars are operating at their peak efficiency against a team like the Seahawks. This leads to the pivotal question: how aggressive will they be this offseason? This franchise could genuinely be one impactful bounce, one shrewd acquisition, away from ascending to the status of the NFL's premier team. That potential reality must inform their decision-making calculus. The process is complex, contingent upon league-wide availability, which free agents hit the market, who receives franchise tags, which players are placed on the trade block. It intertwines with draft evaluations and the domino effect of other teams' transactions. If a rival trades for a draft pick, it may signal an intention to select a quarterback, altering the landscape. Numerous variables remain in flux. Nevertheless, I am utterly captivated to witness the Jaguars' approach. Their actions in the coming months will reveal their own internal assessment of how proximate they believe they are to hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. Those are my perspectives. I am eager to hear yours. What are your thoughts on the Jacksonville Jaguars, the continued evolution of Trevor Lawrence, and his burgeoning synergy with head coach Liam Cohen? Please share your insights in the comments below. I read every single response. Whether you are in full agreement or vehemently opposed, let's engage in discussion, let's debate, but ultimately, let's enjoy the discourse. Please consider subscribing to the channel. We are cultivating a fantastic community here, and I would be thrilled to have you join it. My aim is to build something that fosters a genuine sense of connection, something we are all excited to be a part of. I believe we are making significant progress toward that goal. Also, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, as it substantially assists with visibility within the platform's algorithm. Thank you immensely for your time and engagement.